We'll get started. So let me just say hello and welcome to this workshop on a kind of a really stressful conversation to have, navigating the emotional and financial impacts of layoffs. This is whether it's for you, or maybe you're supporting a loved one as they're either facing the potential of a layoff or have already experienced a layoff. By definition, a layoff is, hey, we're letting you go from the job. We might want you back later. By reality, the we might want you back later doesn't happen as often as you might hope it does. So what we're looking at here is, are you navigating a career change, a job change, a life change, a location change, a lot of change, right? So we want to begin to talk about that, just both financially and emotionally. Okay. Let me invite you to take a deep breath. We're going to spend about 30 minutes here and looking at what this is going to look like for you. Okay. When it comes, let me introduce myself first a little bit. I'm Wendy Wright. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist by trade. Been doing that for about 25 years. And I'm also a trained money coach. I'm trained through Karen McCall, who wrote Financial Recovery. If anyone's read that book, it's a really good one. I love to recommend it. And also through that, I've also in my history have a business undergrad. I've been a mortgage banker. I've had businesses. I have worked with hundreds of individuals and couples, both in the money coaching aspect and also, more importantly, the money emotion aspect. Financial therapy is about 10 or 15 years old, depending on how long what you look at as sort of like the beginning of it. And I've been there pretty close since the beginning, working this in private practice, working with individuals and couples. Through that experience, I have often worked with someone either maybe facing a layoff, actually facing a layoff, just coming into dealing with the impacts of a layoff. We've talked about this quite a bit because financial therapy, in short, is the intersection between money and emotions, and income. And how we feel about our income, how we feel about the source of our income is a big part of this that is often overlooked. Sometimes the sort of like short way of looking at money is, am I supposed to budget? Am I supposed to control my spending? If you've heard me talk about much of anything, you know that I am not a budgeter. I don't come in and rush in and try to tell you what to do or how do you fill in these blanks, because it doesn't work. And if you've experienced that yourself, you know what I'm talking about. It's kind of, if you know, right? Today, we are going to look at some specific ways to navigate this landscape. Let's take, well, and from this, as I have developed this financial therapy practice, I've also created 10 principles of financial therapy, and I like to pull from those either both in session, when I'm speaking, when I'm leading workshops like this. So you may hear me mention, hey, this is one of the 10 principles. The number one principle that I believe has to come first, the one we start with, is that we want to approach money with abundant, compassionate curiosity and zero judgment. This is often one of the hardest things to do, and also one of the kind of like most game-changing foundational things to do as well. So one of the 10 principles of financial therapy, again, is to approach money with abundant, compassionate curiosity and zero judgment. Now we're going to dive into a few concrete techniques for emotional management during a layoff and financial management during a layoff. I am not a PowerPoint person per se, because I really do believe in the learning theory of, if you hear something and write it down, it helps your brain really absorb it more. I operate out of this. I want to encourage you right now, if you haven't already, pull a piece of paper handy and start by writing down that first principle of financial therapy. Look at this with curiosity, compassion, and no judgment. Look at your money life, your money story. Okay. I am going to be cheesy as I can right now because I also am going to encourage you to start with a deep breath. Really taking that deep breath, grounding yourself, bringing yourself to this moment in your chair. If a layoff is in your story right now, that is often very dysregulating to your nervous system. So we want to bring in this moment to take that deep breath. What we are processing in this time are emotions, typically anxiety, which are fear-based emotions. So it may not sound like I'm anxious in your head. What you may be hearing is, I'm freaked out. I don't know what to do. I'm scared. Lots of that kind of stuff, or you feel a tightness in your throat. You're like, oh my gosh, I don't know what to do. We're talking also about how do you manage uncertainty? And this is often really shows up in our relationship with money because we may want money to provide us with certainty, and maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. And in a time of job change, you are feeling uncertain, and that's also really important to look at. Another really big emotional process in the time of a layoff is grief. And I want to normalize this for you because grief also doesn't show up as, oh, I'm having grief now. It can show up as maybe you spend this weekend in front of the TV or reading a book or playing a game, any sort of like, or taking a nap where you've just shut down. And I want to normalize that for you because that is sometimes how grief shows up or sadness shows up. Feeling stuck shows up, and it may also then create sort of a sense of panic of like, oh my gosh, I've got to fix this problem. I want to normalize that. Okay, maybe you go through a period of time, a few hours, a couple of days, where you're just you can't do anything. This is normal, and this is a part of that grief process. Grief is sort of a anger, sadness jumble, and then a bargaining sort of like, oh my gosh, if I do this and this, or if you're talking with a higher power, like if you just give me this thing, I'll promise I'll always be good. Those are the kind of bargaining messages you hear in your head, which move you toward acceptance. By moving toward that acceptance phase of grief, and this can take 10 minutes, 10 hours, 10 days. It's different for everybody. Once you reach that acceptance, though, it's easier to breathe. It's easier to say, okay, I can do this. I know the next steps I need to do. So for instance, maybe one thing you've been trying to do is update your resume and you feel stuck and you just keep staring at it and staring at it. I want to invite you to go ahead and walk away from it for a little bit. Allow yourself, maybe there's some grieving to process. You can take a grief walk. I made this up, but I find it to be helpful. Clients have said this is helpful, where you just take 10, 20 minutes of a walk and you just name the things you're sad and mad about. Maybe some tears fall while you're doing this. Maybe if you're lucky enough to live by the ocean, you can go to the ocean and scream a little bit because it's really loud already there. If you are a little more, like I'm in the mountains here in Colorado, I can see them out my window. So I'm like, if you're by the mountains, maybe you're by a body of water, a lake, a stream, something where you can throw some rocks in. That can also feel really satisfying for the anger part here. And so give yourself a half hour, maybe take a break, then come back. You might be a little more ready to approach updating your resume. Okay. So our nervous system is really dysregulated. You're also then going to go to some of your own baseline coping. And what that can look like is maybe your typical coping mechanism is to avoid something. Okay. Maybe it's to holler out. Okay. That's also okay. Maybe it's to cry. That's okay. Maybe it's to freak out. And that's okay. Remember, we're approaching this with abundant, compassionate curiosity and zero judgment. Okay, so we're looking at these different things here. That was a lot of emotional information, so you may need to take a deep breath. Taking a deep breath is part of my my foundational, if any of you have gotten the foundational chapter 1 of the Financial Therapy Journal, and then throughout all the other chapters is this practice what I call breathe, intend, move. Okay. So we take a breath, we name an intention, and then we make an action step based on that intention. We'll say a little bit more like that about that later. But okay, so we've got some emotions. We're going to name them. We're going to allow space to process them, maybe take a grief walk, maybe cry, maybe numb out for a little bit. All of that's okay. Now, let me name 3 essential money management tips as you are either preparing for or navigating a layoff. Now, one of my 10 principles is that a plan is only as good as the adjustment process. And wow, are you ever in an adjustment process right now, right? So what this means is often we can fill in the blanks, we can make a plan, we can write down all the right answers and feel like this is it, this is the way it's going to be. But what happens is then life happens and things happen, things change. And a job change is a big change. What we want to be able to do is know how to navigate that change. Okay, so the adjustment process is filled with communication, filled with compassionate curiosity and zero judgment. Now, if you had a plan, that's fine. We can look at your plan and build an adjustment process. If you've never made a plan or you've made plans and they've never stuck, that's fine too. Remember, compassionate curiosity and zero judgment. It doesn't help to judge the plan. So another of my principles is to know that you're not good or bad with money. I'm using air quotes. You're not bad with money and you're not good with money. We want to be able to say, this is what I've done. I don't love it. Here's what I want to do going forward. Okay. To loosen up some of that all or nothing thinking. So because all or nothing thinking is not a plan. Like filling in all the blanks is not a plan. Saying I'm bad with money, so why bother is not a plan. But all or nothing thinking often represents an emotion. This is important too, and we'll talk about this a little bit when we come to job interviews and things like that too. But what's happening when you think, oh my gosh, I've got to get this job, then that becomes really polarizing and really scary. And what it's really representing is that you feel a little panicked. Okay, feel panicked, we'll deal with that. Okay, so when we want to build a plan, if you are facing a layoff, what I like to recommend is to take a little bit of time, write down some of the things that you would like to see happen, and then we come back into, so what are some of the mechanics? One of the things you may hear from people when you're facing or when you're building a plan at all is to hurry up and pay off debt. This is not always the right answer. And before you step into some financial uncertainty, paying off your debt can feel like a good thing, but it may not actually be the priority. You want to look at the whole picture. You want to look at what's going to carry me best through the next 6 to 12 months. This is where another one of my principles comes in, where I talk about the fact that budget is to money what diet is to food. You may have heard this before, but it's like, so I won't go into it too much in today's context, but paying off debt is to money what diet is to food as well. It kind of has this quick fix to it, but being in debt is not the issue. We want to have time to look at what led to using debt as a payment method. We want to look at that so that you're not just creating a cycle and you're not just creating scarcity and you're not just creating this idea that this false promise of I'll be perfect, I'll be good if I'm out of debt. So if you're facing financial uncertainty, don't just pick one thing to quote unquote fix. Let's look at everything on the table. So we want to look at what are your assets, what are your resources, and then what is a debt payoff plan that works within all of that strategy. And some of that may mean to stall off on paying off debt, because first we want to meet your needs. We want to have your basic needs met. So part of this planning then is to assess your current resources. I like to do this on a piece of paper because I really do feel like your brain slows down a little bit when you're writing this out. If you want to build it on a spreadsheet, that's fine. If you were in a partnership with someone and one of you is spreadsheet savvy and the other one is not, I would like to ask you to default to using paper, okay? You can build it on a spreadsheet if that makes sense to your brain, and then maybe take that, print it off, and then look at it together so you can both handwrite on it. Because the most important thing right now is to have a system of looking at money that makes sense to both brains in the partnership, okay? So when you begin to do that, let's look at all the resources. You want to look at public and private resources. And I want you to, again, do this. I want to encourage you to do this with that compassionate curiosity and zero judgment. You don't have to make a decision yet. If you've had a story about unemployment or other public resources, allow space for that. Look at that. Maybe it felt wrong in the past, and now is the time where it will feel right. You don't know that yet. So first lay them out on the table, like laying out cards on the table. Then begin to talk to yourself, or you and your partner talk to each other about what are some thoughts and feelings, at least 3 thoughts and 3 feelings that come with each of those. Then you can begin to settle into, okay, what are the resources and what is the timeline of resources that we want to use? And again, projecting out about 6 to 12 months. Okay, now I want to pause right there because that may bring up some emotions. Sometimes we feel like, okay, this job situation, I need to resolve this pronto. Of course you want to, because it's very uncomfortable and there's a lot of grief here, okay? And yet that's not what happens. So we want to stretch out the plan. And again, we have an adjustment process for the plan. So then if you get a job, we'll come back and make different decisions. But in my experience, it has worked out well for families, individuals, whoever's facing a layoff, to make more of a 6 to 12 month plan. Really stretch it out and look at this, because that way you are prepared for a longer term and can always adjust to a shorter term situation and make changes. Okay, so we want to build a plan. We want to have an adjustment process in place, which involves like how do I want to communicate with myself? How often do I want to check in on my plan? Maybe once a month. How often, or how do I want to communicate with my partner if we're going to make shifts and adjustments to the plan? And we want to do this again, compassionate curiosity and zero judgment. That makes a huge difference. Okay. Now, that probably brought up a lot of emotions, right? Even often when I say, let's look at a 6 to 12 month trajectory, that can bring up a lot of emotions because you want this over with as soon as possible anyway. So let's come into some emotional management as well. And I want to do some right now because I really, again, want to encourage you to pause, take that deep breath, experience the sensation of grounding yourself in your seat. Just feel yourself in your seat, maybe put your feet on the floor if they're not there, and say, be like, okay, just take a few breaths. You can do this. You will figure it out. You will find a way. You will find a path towards some sort of resolution to this. And also recognizing that, and maybe you're really sad. Maybe this is something you never thought would happen to you. Maybe this is something that you feel that it feels so personal. Maybe it feels like, gosh, why me? All of this is very normal. You're really not going to have a wrong feeling right now. Let me say a few things specifically about managing emotions. One is I want to go back to this idea that all or nothing thinking can often reflect an emotion. So in other words, if someone says, I can't stand all, trying to think of a really good example. I should have thought of one. Let's say you are saying, I never want to go to the movies again because the last time I went to the movies, the air conditioner didn't work, whatever. In other words, that sort of like, I will never do that thing again is more of an expression of that pissed me off, or that blew my mind. I was surprised. I was shocked. I couldn't believe it happened. And that your answer is to no longer go to the movies is probably not something that's really going to happen for most of us. It's more of an expression of, I don't want that experience again. So hopefully that makes sense when I'm saying here, all or nothing, black and white thinking, even catastrophe thinking, such as, oh no, I will always get laid off again. I will never have job security again. Like all of these kind of statements can be connected to a feeling of fear, anxiety. These are all really normal feelings. Loss, grief. So being able to name the feeling and process that a little bit can be more effective than deciding, for instance, I will always get laid off. Like that makes a really big difference in how you show up for work every day for the next 10, 20, 30 years, however many years you'll be working in your life, right? Okay. So another way that this shows up is before an interview. If you feel like you have to get this job, and there's an intensity to that and a catastrophe on the other side. If I don't get this job, boom, and it just feels this vague sense of doom or catastrophe. We want to notice that as an emotion because it's actually not a data point. There will be other jobs if you don't get this one. But when you go into a job interview with that intensity, then you begin to feel really scared. Your breathing changes, your ability to concoct answers to interview questions really gets compromised. Some of you may have experienced that before. So noticing that can be really powerful and helpful. Okay. Now we want to talk about regulating your nervous system. One of these is, again, with this classic exercise that I have, breathe, intend, move. By pausing, and when I say breathe, I just mean like 2 times and count to 3 or 4, breathe in 3 or 4, breathe out 3 or 4. Do it again, maybe one more time. Just helps settle things down. This is helpful as you either are beginning to work on your resume, or beginning to, if you're setting up an interview, or if you're walking into or going into a virtual room like this interview. This can help soothe your nervous system. And then the intend part is you might intend to get this job. Okay, that's the goal. An intention, a goal is like, okay. The action then would be, I want to stay present while I'm in this room, or I want to stay present and grounded and answer the questions to the best of my ability. That's the action. So we're breaking it from this big intention of, I'm going to solve all my problems right now, to what is the action step you can take in this next 30 minutes? One of them might be to pay attention. Okay. I have more resources on my website, wendywrightfinancialtherapy.com, to help you with this journaling exercise that are there. But as I told you, this isn't a big sales pitch workshop. I'm just kind of walking you through some skills that you can either use today or share with someone. Okay. Two other tips that I have given that clients have said have been helpful when it comes to interviewing. One is, remember why you would hire yourself. Think about why you would hire yourself to do the job. That often helps you come back into what you are bringing to the table, knowing that if someone has gone so far as to interview you, they've probably seen something. And maybe because you've been stressed, you've forgotten what you can bring to the job. So write out a few sentences about why you would hire yourself. Build your resume then to perhaps touch on and talk about the reasons why you would hire yourself. That way you're solidifying this in your brain. And then practice. I want you to practice answering interview questions, especially if it's been more than a couple of years since you last interviewed. Either practice with a trusted friend or partner, practice with an AI source, practice with maybe you find a meditation or recording of here are some potential interview questions. And then if there's nobody you can practice with, record your answers and listen to them. Now, I know I don't like to record. I don't like to listen to my cell phone recording, so that may be challenging for you, but if nobody else is there to hear you, which happens sometimes, then it's okay for you to do it, to listen to yourself. Okay. So we've talked about some of my 10 principles of financial therapy that may help you right now. Approaching things with abundant, compassionate curiosity and zero judgment, using recognizing that the plan is only as good as its adjustment process, and recognizing all or nothing, black and white, good, bad thinking as maybe really representing an emotion. Then we talked about some tips for we also named a few tips for interviews and for getting to your resume, processing the emotions that are getting in the way. I did also promise you guys a few tips on talking to kids, which is, in the interest of time, I'm just going to say a couple of things about talking to children right now, because this is asked of me often from my clients with children. I like to start by recognizing and remembering their context is so different than yours. And especially if you and your co-parent partner person in your life have some unresolved intensity toward each other, sometimes this comes out passively toward the kids when phrases such as, like, we can't do that right now because mommy or daddy doesn't have a job. Okay. That doesn't really tell kids anything other than mom and dad are having a fight, or mom and mom, or dad and dad. Okay. Happens there too. But we want to be able to say, I like to say, until they're about teenagers, you can target their giving them about as many words as they are old. In other words, the younger they are, the more concrete their brain is, and the more you want to be able to give them a short answer that fits their age and stage. Okay. This can look like something like, that doesn't work for us today. That's all they really need to know. Or I'm having a hard day. Let me take a time out. They know timeouts. Let me take a time out. I'll come back to you on that decision. We want to begin to decrease the reactivity and intensity of reactions around children in order to increase the connection, safety, and security that you're wanting to build in the family home. Okay. That was a very, very brief overview. Hopefully this gave you just a few things to hold on to while you're struggling through this very, very challenging time of navigating the landscape of layoffs. This will be available for replay, and you can share it. Hopefully there'll be someone in your life you feel like you can share this with. I'll send you all those resources in an email in a couple of days. Thanks for joining me today.